How's it going, everybody? Today we will be making a router circle cutting jig. Let's get started. So, as the name denotes, a router circle cutting jig helps you cut circles using a router. You don't always have to use a router to make circles with wood. You can use a jigsaw or you can use a bandsaw to be able to make circles. However, you need to build jigs specific for those types of tools to be able to do so. I find that the router produces the cleanest cut, and that's why we're choosing to build that today. I should note that you can buy these jigs online in places like Rockler, Woodcraft, or Amazon, and I'll leave a couple of links in the description below for those of you who are interested in a circle cutting jig, but you don't want to build one. The reason why I'm building one today is because I'm on a little bit of a time crunch for a video that I'm working on for next week that requires a circular piece of wood, and there's a blizzard outside and I have zero interest in going out there, and so we're building one instead. Let's get started. For this project, I'm using a scrap piece of 1/4-inch plexiglass. You can find these at your home supply store, or you can use scrap pieces of 1/4-inch or 1/2-inch plywood. First, you want to measure the width of your router base and trim the jig piece to that width. You can then remove the existing router base plate to use as a template. Notice the holes are recessed to accommodate the panhead screws, as we will need to replicate this onto the jig. To make sure the template does not move, I'm using double-sided tape. If you have an assortment of drill bits, you can find the size that fits most snug into the smaller through hole and mark the center of the hole using the tip of the bit. To make the mark easier to find, I'm using a Sharpie. Then we can match the size of the larger hole using an appropriately sized Forstner bit. At the drill press with the Forstner bit mounted, we can determine how far down the recess needs to go and lock in the stopping point. This will prevent the bit from drilling all the way through the plexiglass. We can then use the smaller bit to drill through the plexiglass. Because the Forstner bit leaves a center point, the next drill bit will automatically adjust itself to center if you're close enough. With the holes drilled, we can do a test fit to make sure our jig can be mounted on the router. We will need to know the center of our router bit. The easiest way to do this is by mounting a bit with a pointy tip. Then, drop the bit and scribe the point. We can then use the center of the point to scribe a line down the spine of the jig. For this jig, I plan to exclusively use a 1/4-inch spiral bit to do the cutting. That means that the router bit will extend half the diameter, which is 0.125 inch, from the center of the scribed line. Thus, the radius of our final cut circle will be the distance between the innermost cutting edge of the router bit and the pivot point extending down at the spine of the jig. We can then finish by drilling a bigger hole around the router bit, as this will allow more space for better chip clearance. While you can stop here and the jig is 100% functional, I am opting to trim some of the excess parts of the jig and sanding the edges to a smooth finish. When it comes to actually cutting the circle, we first need to scribe 2 diagonal lines on the workpiece to find the center. Then we can drill a shallow hole that is the same diameter as the holes on the spine of our jig. Using the same bit, we can pin the pivot point at our desired circle size. With the router turned on, we can plunge the bit into the wood and move the router in a circular motion around the pivot. While you can take many shallow passes using this method to cut through the entire workpiece, sometimes the workpiece may be too thick. In those situations, you can make a few passes, trim off the excess on a bandsaw or using a jigsaw, and then you can finish the circle using a flush trim bit. That's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to click the like button below and consider subscribing to my channel. Tune in next week where we will be using the circle cutting jig to build something a little bit more interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.